Hello everyone, this is the first in what I hope to be a series of great chats, introducing you to some amazing people I've come across in my networking. So welcome to E2E Studios Chats. Today we're kicking off our first progress with someone who has some outstanding experiences and someone I was instantly drawn to and really inspired by. Welcome, Penny Catterick, and thank you for joining me today.
Amy, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks. So I'm thinking, just to start it off, give a voice to yourself. Tell us about yourself. Tell us your experience and just who you are.
Well, my journey has been an interesting one, Ailey, in as much as it really began many, many moons ago, around about the year 1963, when at the age of 5, I discovered I learned, if you like, that there was something different about me. What was different is that I am transgender. And my journey from then really took me into some intriguing places. And we can go through whatever elements of that you think is helpful. But what it's enabled me to do as I reflect upon it now is lead a life in the executive C-suite across multiple organizations in the high-tech industry, in the defense industry, from Silicon Valley to Shanghai, as I say, and achieve in those industries from a C-suite perspective, whilst trying to deal with the dis-ease, as I call it, the dis-ease, which ultimately leads to disease. You know, and what does that disease look like when you're trying to fight off certain things, you know, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, and even suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts. So I know a lot about harboring things which really you're trying to fight, and what that can do to your body.
Yeah,
So,
and it's something that everyone experiences. You know, it doesn't matter if you're top of the chain or a start out, you know, or if you're just working a regular 9-to-5 job. It's something that affects everyone.
Adi, I think that's a fabulous point you make, because one of the things I try and work with all of my clients is authenticity. And you don't have to do something drastic like announce you're transgender or whatever. Everyone has an authentic self, and Thoreau, in his work on civil disobedience, basically says everybody has music within them. The problem is a lot of people go to their grave not having played their music. Wayne Dyer, Professor Wayne Dyer, I love him. And he speaks of Thoreau and Emerson a lot. And Ivan Illich, the short story by Tolstoy, on his deathbed, Ivan Illich, an accountant in Moscow, basically reflects back on his life, and Tolstoy brings out, and he says, what if I didn't lead the life I was intended to lead? And whilst it's a book, it's a short story, it really is something that I know a lot of people reflect upon in the later years of their life, because as a Samaritan, I took many calls in Edinburgh from people who were near the end of their life, and finding God was one thing, but also asking the question, I really haven't done in my life what I had intended to do. So you're absolutely right, Ailey, that being your authentic self, being true to yourself is absolutely critical. And when you're not, it does lead to that word dis-ease. And therefore it leads to deregulated hormones, which ultimately leads to disease that many people live with today.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic insight into it. Being authentic is something that, it's not just about your personality as well. If you're a business owner, people want to know who you are. If you've got struggles, people can relate to those struggles. But if you're one of these people that just shows success all the time, people are kind of like, okay, but what else is there? Um, so yeah, definitely authentic self is so important in all aspects, because if you can't love yourself and who you are, what is it, in the words of RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else?
Honestly, that is so true, because if you can't, it's so true. If you cannot find love in your own heart, you have nothing to give away. So it is so true. But going back to your point around success, material success, and I've had it, and the car, the German car, the prestigious house, all of those things. It's remarkable how many people have those things, but they're the most unhappiest people on God's earth, because what they have not found is success in their heart, in their life. And they're always striving to get the next thing. And
Yeah.
why? Because they live a life from a position of lack.
Yeah, they're missing something. There's a hole that needs to be filled.
Yes, so that is so true. And I think today, one of the things we spoke a little about when we first met was women, and women's confidence is a big thing for me. And you get a number of modern day, shall we call them prophet psychologists, who come on and say we lack nothing. And it is so true that it doesn't matter who you are, man, woman, you are a unique individual. You are a genius, you are a special person, and you lack nothing. The
Yeah,
difficulty with women in particular today, just focusing in on that for a moment, is that their confidence has been dented, probably in earlier life, and they carry a lot of that luggage with them. And I think in terms of lack, the lack that they experience in their life is more from them having to compensate for events earlier in their life, which really, really does dent their confidence to a high degree.
oh yeah, and I totally agree with you on there. And for example, for myself, I was told I was slow and quiet and all of this kind of stuff in high school, mostly from male teachers. So there's always, but for me, I turned that into a strive of going, ha, proved you wrong. But for others, that just dictates everything for them. Um, and when we first met as well, you made such a great point, and men on the higher ups that don't for a second think that they're not like a grandparent, an uncle, a dad, or a husband who want to see, if their daughter, for instance, came in and wanted to get to the top, they wouldn't invest their time in that company if their daughter didn't have the same chances. And I think that's a big thing right now, and a lot of people view that as us versus them. And in my mind, that us versus them means that we have to be better than men, that women have to be better than men, and we have to do this better and we have to do that better, which isn't really the equality strive that they're actually aiming for. It needs to be more of a collaborative approach. I know in IT from my personal experience that I wouldn't have gotten half of the positions and the opportunities I had if it wasn't for the men in my life supporting me. And that's really where it comes down to, is that level of support that you can get from the people around you. Doesn't matter if they're man, women, whatever, as long as you've got that initial support in you.
if you break that down a little bit, and I think this is where the big mistake at the moment lies. We divide out between the sexes, male and female, woman, man. But in essence, you need to take the discussion down to lower levels like masculine and feminine. Because when you get to those levels, you begin to realize that, back to the point you made, in a C-suite, wherever I've been, men really, really do not argue against the case of a woman. They don't argue for the case of a man. They genuinely, and I'll come back to this in just a little while, they genuinely argue for the good of the candidate and the good of the business. And I think it's a misnomer. And I don't know really why people peddle this, that at board level, and I think it's become a commonly held view that there is this discrimination going on. But the point I'm making is, you know, if you go back 2,500 years ago, 500 BCE, when I think the finest managerial handbook of all, the Tao Te Ching, was written by Lao Tzu. I mean, he states, and if you look at people like Aristotle, who really, really plagiarized some of his work, even to modern day people, you know, Tom Peters is one I quote regularly, more from some of the things he used to do in his philosophy of wow. But they go back, they take a lot of their learning from what Lao Tzu wrote, but he basically said, know the male, but abide by the female. In other words, know the masculine within you, but live by the feminine within you. So whether you're a man or whether you're a woman, you have both of those within you. And I think a lot of people forget that. They go man, therefore masculine, heavily masculine, and it's completely wrong. I think a lot of alpha males, and there are alpha women in boardrooms as well. But the essence of it is to realize that men have a lot of feminine within them. And they are, as you rightly said, on the lookout, because they wouldn't like their daughter, they wouldn't like their wife, they wouldn't like any female member of their family mistreat. And I think that's what people have to bear in mind.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's I when I heard your views on in that networking event, something just clicked to me, and I went, you know what, you're right. She's so right. Like everything she's saying makes sense. Whereas like there's other groups that I've seen where it's all, women have this problem, women have that problem, women, yeah, we have these issues and things that we need to fight, but we can't fight it ourselves. We are going to need the men in our lives to support us, and we are going to need those people who are higher up in the branches to support us. You know, it's just a fact. We can't fight everything alone. And that, I guess that comes right back down to being your authentic self. You can't fight depression on your own. You can't fight all these illnesses and all these struggles on your own. You need to have that element of support. And, you know, I've been very, very lucky in the fact that, you know, I've got some learning difficulties and I've got mental health myself. And my two business partners are men, and they just go, okay, so what? Get back to work, you know, in the nicest way possible. They just accept that it's part of who I am. And I think that's where the issue is that people don't tend to show their authentic self. And that's where, you know, the mistrust and the not accepting sort of comes in. Is, you know, if I presented myself as a complete girly girl with, you know, rainbows and unicorns and whatever else is associated with it, that's not me being me, because I'm someone who's scruffy. I'm a creative person. Everything's a mess. I really love Batman, and I like motorsports and ice hockey. I'm not your typical like girly girl. So if I presented myself forward as a girly girl, that's not me being me. And that's really where everything that you're saying makes so much sense. And the even more I guess persuasive side of it is the fact you've experienced both ends of it as well.
Yes, and actually everything you've just said there is about that expression of yourself. It goes back to Thoreau. You need to play the music in your heart, and be it write a book, be it interested in motorsport, be it interested in whatever it is. It's being free. And I think if you ask me to try and sum it up, there's an expression James Allen wrote in his book, and you'll hear this frequently misquoted, that circumstances reveal the person. They don't make the person. Circumstances make the person is what you typically hear.
Yeah.
They don't. James Allen, who wrote the quote, and he probably got it from way back, says circumstances reveal the person. And typically when Wayne Dyer used the expression of an orange, and he basically says, if you squeeze an orange, be it in the morning or the afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's only one thing you're going to get out, and that's orange juice. Always orange juice. But if you take a person and you squeeze a person, pressurize them, it could be a circumstance, it could be a working colleague. What do you get out? Well, what you get out is what you reveal. And that is, if inwardly, it goes back to your point, if you're a loving person and you're squeezed, you will get love out. But if you're a vindictive individual and you're squeezed, what will come out? Resentment, bitterness, hatred, all of those things. So it's a very good analogy that putting someone under pressure, it reveals them, but what it reveals is where they are not free. In other words, there's something occurred in their life that they protect against. They have to divert their authenticity to cope with it. And I know that from personal experience, where I had to mask who I was for the best part of 50 years, and at a great expense to my health and well-being. So you're absolutely right. Being free to express yourself is the ultimate goal for all of us.
Yeah, and that's what it should be all the time. Like I've worked in various places where the boss will come out and they'll show you, this is who I am, and this is the business, and this is what we're going to get. And then you're just kind of like, all right, cool. So how was your weekend? And they won't have that chat with you because it's all results driven. Whereas if you can actually build that relationship with people and encourage people in your team just to be who they are, I think you'll get much better results. And luckily me and my guys share that same view in the fact, that if you're not strong in one area, you have to tell us you're not strong in that area so that we can either support you and train you to be stronger in it if you want to, or we'll find something that that you're passionate about. Because if you love what you're doing, that's you being you, sort of thing. I would never ask my business partners to take over the graphics and the social media, because they'll just be like, I don't want to do it. So, and I would never want them to put me forward for websites, because I don't know the first thing that I'm doing. I know how to design them. I don't know the code or anything. So again, it all comes into sort of like who you are, the support you can get, and then also finding people that share that sort of view. Like, you don't want to end up in a group of people that, let's say off the top of my head, because, you know, like football fans tend to be a very similar mind focus. And I find it's harder for men in that situation to actually express themselves and be honest, you know, unless, of course, they've had a few pints down and they're drunk and then they're all having that emotional moment. But I find it's harder for them to be that emotional connection. And again, that also comes into sort of like how we view some men, that men have to be tough and they can't have these feelings. And to me, that's wrong, because I'm genuinely someone, if I don't care who you are or what your views are, what your religion is, things like that, as long as you're a genuine nice person, you know, I'm quite happy to have a chat with you.
Let's unpack that, because there's a huge amount in what you've just said there. Let's just go back. I did say I'd touch upon this.
Yeah.
There is a science that came out from Richard Dawkins in the 70s called memetics. And memetics is the thinking physiology, if you like, psychology, which is similar to genetics. And what it's basically saying is, and it lies at the bottom of all of this, when we are born, let's start there.
Let's take it right back.
We're going to go right back.
We're going to go right back.
Born, we come out with some very, very fundamental needs. And actually, those needs don't change through life. The first thing is love. We want to be loved. We need to be able to breathe, and we need to be fed. And the other thing is, which is unique about the human existence, is that unlike all other mammals, we come out with eyes, vision. Our eyes are part of our brain, which again is unique. And our eyes are developed in the first trimester. So you get eyes, and the other thing is the amygdala, the fear mechanism within the brain is fully developed. And so we come out of the womb, out of the uterus, readily primed for fear, to predict and to protect. So people are ready to be in that fearful mode. And if they're brought up in a home with parents who stimulate the fear mechanisms, because it could be also for all sorts of socio-economic reasons. You as a child grow up being fearful. And I think this is what people forget, and this is why people are very different. Depending upon how they're brought up, memes in their life, memories, it's forged. There's a belief that between the ages of 0 and 3 or 0 and 7, depending upon who you talk to, people will say you are formed in those years, because that's and you'll like this, I'll come back to this, but that programming that forms you as a character is developed in the first 7 years. So if you're in a home and you're watching the father do fatherly things and the mother do motherly things, that's programming you. That's going into your subconscious mind. And that's forming you in terms of being who you are. Now, let's put it in computer terms. If you look at it and you ask, well, people should be conscious of who they are. Well, no. And I'll give you 2 pieces of information on this. The first one is this, that if you look at it in computing power, if you look at the conscious mind, the frontal lobe, that operates at about 40 bytes of information per second. That's what it processes, 40 bytes of information per second. The subconscious processes 40 million bytes of information per second. So when people say they do things with willpower, they do things consciously, you can't sustain it. The memory, the mind can't sustain it. That's why we operate subconsciously most of the time. That's why when you meet an individual, a man, if the man has been brought up in an environment which is very patriarchal, then the man will likely be that way inclined to operate themselves. And that's why this discussion around trying to bring equality into the workplace is so hard. And it's not because men are consciously operating in a certain way. That's just the way they've been brought up.
And I suppose you can flip that as well, and that's just the way that women are as well.
Sorry, Ellie.
But yeah, I'm just saying you can flip that in the fact that, you know, that's the way men are because they've been programmed from a young age, and you can flip that and say that's the way that women are because of their programming at a young age.
Absolutely, that is that, and that's and until we figure out how to deal with that, it's going to be forever a difficulty. And that's why when I operate with my clients, my female clients, I don't look at things going on externally. I simply say this, and it goes back to the points you were making, that if you can believe, and there's no reason why you wouldn't believe, that there is nothing stopping you progressing other than a belief, it's just as valid to believe that you can be successful as to believe that you're going to be held back. And it's incredible, the results I get when women change their psyche and think, well, it's just the way I think about things. It's not a reality. It's just the way I think about things can determine whether I'm going to be successful or whether I'm not.
Yeah, and you know, I guess, you know, you can kind of look at it like Peter Pan, and you know, I do believe in fairies, I do, and then the fairies come back, you know, and you know, like belief is a belief, and
sure, for sure.
I do.
Unless you have positive beliefs, a vision. Here's the thing: past hurt, drives future fear. And what that means is, and this is true in professional clients, professional athletes, the reason why a golfer, for example, will not perform despite the fact they're technically competent is because they fear the next putt they're going to make will be like the one they made a hole or two ago. Past fear, past hurt, the hurt they experience causes them to fear the next thing they're going to do. But if you have that vision, that Peter Pan vision you spoke of, you move towards that direction and you begin to let go of that hurt and look forward to the joy.
There was a paper that I read, I need to see if I can find it again, which was about teaching people to code. Now, they split the groups into two halves, and one person got told, so one group was told, that's not right, you've done a mistake, you know, given penalties for their mistakes. And the other half were told, that's not quite right, let's try it again. And what the study found was that the ones that were told, that's not quite right, let's try it again, actually progressed further than the ones that were given penalties. So that kind of falls into what you're saying about the belief and the fact that, you know, if you go, all right, that's not quite right, but we can do it again, let's go do it again and keep going. Whereas if someone tells you, you've done it wrong, here's a penalty, then they found that that group just slowly started dropping off. And I think only like 1% actually made it to the finals in that group, whereas they had a more of a 90% success rate with the others. So, I know that there's certain trainings where it's like, you yell at them and you go, oh, you can't do this, to try and boost them, or you give them like a penalty or something to try and get them to reach that goal quicker. It doesn't actually work. You demoralize them. So like in sales, there's always a target that you have to hit, or there's a penalty. That is a rather dated process, I think, because if you go, right, we've got this target to hit, if you hit this target, we've got a little prize for you, that you're more driven to get that prize. And even if you don't hit that target, it's still something to go for next time.
So here's the thing. So fear immobilizes people. So to your example, where they're using punitive measures to try and stimulate the kind of activity, you drive fear. What is fear doing? Fear is causing you to stress and will ultimately immobilize you. What you need to look at, and let me give you a few statistics just to help that conversation along a little bit. Two measures that I use frequently, and these come from the highest performing industries. There's no doubt in my mind that what the practices in Silicon Valley around human value and human encouragement are probably the best you can come across. But if you go there and you measured employee engagement, just as an example, you'd find it up in the 70% range, best of class, and that's across the globe. If you look at the G7 countries, we are down in the 10 to 15% range as far as employee engagement concerned. In fact, in countries like Japan, believe it or not, it's extremely low. If you look in North America, you're up in the 30% range. So what is interesting is the current debate that's going on about hybrid working from home or working in the office, where all of the pundits and the commentators who comment upon this don't pay any attention to how bad working in an office was before the pandemic struck. Productivity in the G7 countries is extremely low. Out of the G7 countries, the UK is the 5th worst performing country. Productivity is extremely low. So you've got two combinations. You've got low employee engagement and you've got low productivity. And people wonder whether it's a man leading an organization or a woman. I'll come back to a woman in a moment. Are you wondering why people want to get out of the office and work from home? It's got to do with the quality of their leadership and how they're being led. And a typical leadership style is not one from love, from the heart. It's stimulated by fear.
Yep.
And people want to escape that.
Yeah, they do. And, like I find, obviously, we're in a startup, my guys are down in Manchester and I'm up in Scotland. And I found, working from home, yeah, it does have its downsides. I'm easily distracted. I've got 2 baby bunnies in the garden that I want to go and sit with all the time. But that comes down to like how you manage yourself. It's not about the environment. Whereas in an office, I would be there 9 to 5. I'd probably get half the work done that I can do from home. And there's certain policies that they had where you can't take work home or something. And I'd be like, oh, but I'm not going to meet this deadline. I'm not going to meet this project end date because I need to do that a little bit extra. And I've ran out of time at the end of the day to do it. And I know for some people who are probably on the spectrum, some people have that attitude of, I have this project, it has to be finished by this date. If I don't finish it by this date, I'm gonna struggle. they have to finish what they've started. And I can relate to that because I'm one of those people that has to finish something that I've started. And having a time frame where you've got 9 to 5 and that's it, that's all you've got to work on. You'll find that people tend to get different bursts of energy at different points of the day. Some people are better working in the evening than they are during the day, like first in the morning. And yeah, the office environment, I do think, stimulates quite a lot of fear, especially if it's harder to have like those little private moments that you need, like the micro breaks. If your searches are constantly monitored, you kind of then, you're scared to search up. If you're stuck on a solution, you're scared to search for that solution online. Like, you've got this problem, you can't fix it, you don't know who to turn to, but you can't turn to the internet for that help because your Wi-Fi and your searches are monitored. It's fear. If you search for something, they might go, oh, if they see that I do this and I can't do my job, then they might fire me. It has a lot of what ifs and mights in it. Whereas working from home, if there is a problem, it's your Wi-Fi, no one's going to be monitoring it. You're more free.
You just mentioned that word again, freedom. But a lot of it has to come down to the quality of leadership. Let's go back to the masculine versus feminine argument just for a moment. Zenger and Folksman recently published, I said recently, 2019, they've done a series of assessments of leadership capabilities. And out of a basket of 19 leadership capabilities, women came out on top of men, 17 out of 19. If you look at STEM subjects currently studied, so that's your science, your technology, engineering, and mathematics subjects, women are now girls are outperforming boys. So the evidence is very, very clear that having a softer, and it is, let's not hide from that, a softer, more compassionate approach to leadership, you get better outcomes. Why? Because you're driving people along a path of creativity, regeneration in their normal working day. You are driving them up the fight or flight fear route. And you'll find that those companies that have got very high levels of employee engagement use a style of leadership which is based on the softer skills, enabling people to perform, not directing them.
Yeah, and
it's huge.
Yeah, and talking about STEM, so I was a Lovelace Colloquium British Computing Society finalist. Went to Sheffield, presented some of my research where I did some stuff on STEM and how, if you look at women and men in the industry. And I looked at sort of management styles, I looked at what the percentages were, and women, like you say, came out on top because they were able to handle the emotional stuff just slightly better than, their male counterparts. There was also an element of multitasking as well, which was there, but I couldn't really make that definitive because some guys are absolutely excellent at multitasking, but ultimately it came down to that emotional factor. So in one office I managed to put someone in the office and I was like, right, can you just have like an emotional breakdown? Just fake it, whatever. I just need to see how the manager reacts. So the male manager was kind of like, crying and tears. Okay, right, okay. And he tried to come up with a logical approach to it, and didn't really give them that comfort. Whereas the female manager just sat them down, got them a cup of tea, gave them and went, what's up? What's happening? And just listened to them and went, right, okay, so this is what we'll do to support you. Whereas the The male manager was very much like, oh, tears, oh, oh no, what do I do? You know? And again, that comes down to, like we say at the very beginning, that programming at that very young age, because I know, so like there's a guy who does Men to Talk, Luke, and he does fantastic work with guys trying to get them to open up and speak about their stress levels, about the depression and anxiety and things that come in their work. And a lot of them have that difficulty in expressing themselves because of that young age programming. And it comes down to as well as the fact that when it comes to men and women, if there's a problem, women tend to go to the doctors more than a guy does. Because a guy will be like, oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And I'm someone who kind of struggles to connect with women in my own, as a woman, I struggle to connect with women. I connect with guys a bit better. And I've seen this and I've experienced my guy friends going, oh no, I'll be fine. And I'm like, your arm is literally broken. And then you have to drag them over kind of thing. Because they're like, oh, I can fix it. And I'm like, no, this is a broken arm. You need the hospital, you know, because of that tough exterior that can't show weakness, has to be the alpha guy that is programmed in them. And yeah, it's just what it is.
AD is very much to do with social norms, social contagion, toxicity. I mean, here's an interesting point to consider in that context. If you sat next to somebody on an aircraft and they brought out a bag of sweets and started eating the sweets, it increases the likelihood of you wanting to have candy as well by 70%.
Oh yeah, give me a sweetie.
That's how toxic these things can be. So conforming to the tribe, conforming to the norm is easy to do because it is contagious. But this is the thing, going back to the point around authenticity, that the trade today in society is to be authentic often means trading relationships. So if that individual who'd broken his arm, for example, wanted to express more feminine traits in saying, I am generally hurt, I am in pain, they would be thinking, well, what would other people think of me? It would be those thoughts, but it's not what's happening outside of them. Their arm is broken, that's the fact. And this is where the human mind is our worst enemy on occasion, because we then have a series of thoughts ourselves about what others will think of us. In other words, we become victimized by the perceived thoughts of others. And that's what the men in your argument are dealing with.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
their association with their tribe.
Yeah, and you know, that's why I think, so E2E Studios, we've worked with streamers, and I love these people who stream video games, especially our client Queen69, because he doesn't care what people think of him. He just doesn't, you know. And a lot of these people that start streaming, they maybe start off caring what people think of them, caring about that content, caring about how they look, things like that. But as their following grows, as that sort of, as you say, a tribe grows, they've got people who are of similar mindsets. And from that growth, they get to a point where they don't care. And they're like, right, if I say this, people know it's me. If I do this, people know it's me. You know, so, and that's amazing.
Maslow would call those people self-actualized people. In other words, you know, if you look at your hierarchy of needs, they've got all of their basic elements in place. They don't worry about, you know, an income, a house, food, all of those basics. And what Abraham Maslow says is they can operate independent of the view of other people. And that is them rising up and becoming self-actualizing, where people will comment, but that won't detract, that won't make them move away from the direction they're traveling in.
Yeah.
They're independent of the good opinion of other people.
Yeah, and I love it, especially with Quinn, because someone will say something that he doesn't like, and he's like, all right, okay, ban, and they're gone. And that's it. That's, the few seconds of reading what they say, considering what they say, banning them, done, and that's that person out of their mind. They're just don't care. And he's even started a series where he unbans people and he makes them explain why they've said that to all of these people that are watching him. He's got like 18k people that watch him daily. So if you get banned and you want unbanned, you have to explain yourself. And I think that's hilarious because some of the excuses that come up just don't make any sense. And Quinn's like, oh, okay, well, you're staying banned then. And I'm just like, oh, right, okay.
There's a funny dynamic at play there when you actually look at it. So first of all, as far as Quinn is concerned, he is not, if you like, being victimized by other people. He is living in accordance with his own beliefs. But then you think about the people on the other end of it. They are being victimized by him. They are being controlled by him. And I think to a large degree that's how we work in a herd.
Exactly. If you look at the animal kingdom, for example, if you've got, so a great example is kind of like the meerkats. If one meerkat ends up mating with another tribe of meerkats and they come back, they're like, whoa, don't, no. They're kicked out because they don't have that tribe anymore. They purposely left that tribe. And it's the same with like wolves as well. If a wolf steps out of line, they then become a lone wolf because they've stepped out of line of that herd. Well, pack.
Yes, that's true. And what you could say is that really is society, and it's a model of society. But when you are being controlled by people outside of yourself, as I said, it leads to dis-ease. And that dis-ease becomes disease. So when you are allowing yourself to be dictated, often against your better judgment, it will ultimately deregulate, downregulate your genes. And that's when you start to generate proteins of lesser quality, and you find yourself becoming ill, becoming poorly with one thing or another. And you can't put your finger on it necessarily. It was that, or that. But the deregulation of your genes, the deregulation of your proteins leads to ill health. And that, if you like, is the price you pay for allowing somebody, allowing society, allowing this pandemic to make you feel dis-ease with what's going on.
Yeah. And how would you say that translates to someone? So I'm quite a sarcastic person and I kind of enjoy taking the mickey out of myself a lot. Would you say that leads to disease as well? Or is it just a coping method? Is it just one of those things that people are like?
It's a coping mechanism, because you've got your default mode network. So let's talk about self for a minute. Let's talk about, we've not mentioned it, which is quite extraordinary, the ego. What a lot of people will do to satisfy the ego, because the ego always wants to be right.
And it's always there. It doesn't matter who you are.
And you have to have it, because if we didn't have
even I mean, even animals have it. Come on. I mean,
Yeah,
my two rabbits, I've got Jenna who knows she's photogenic. She knows she's photogenic. And
yeah.
then we've got Chloe who knows she can climb. So, if I go see her and I'm like, you're in trouble, she just jumps up and I'm like, okay. Because she's like, you can't get me. I'm up here. I'm climbing. So there's an ego in everything.
And there is, and the level of ego is really the determining factor, because the ego will always want to be right, and you will do certain things. So I'll go back to the golfing example. So someone who is standing in front of a long putt, and what they will do, because they probably think they're going to miss it, they will say to themselves, "That's a long putt anyway. It's not a putt I would typically make." And when they don't make it, they'll turn around and they'll say to themselves, or they'll say to their playing partner, "Well, I didn't think I would reach that." And that's almost like basically saying, "Well, you were right."
Mm-hmm.
You in fact wanted to make that putt, but your ego would not allow you to be deflated. So you come up with those self-deprecating conversations in your head that says, well, you're not going to make this. So let's make it right. Let's say we expect we aren't going to make it. And those are the discussions that the ego has with yourself internally. And the secret to a lot, I think, of what is going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years, meditation is certainly, people talk about it as mindfulness, but we shouldn't beat about the bush. To actually learn to shut down the chatter which the ego generates, which, as I said, is self-deprecating for a lot of the time. It's always striving. It causes you to strive. The ego lies behind a lot of the discomfort people feel today, but learning to be able to control that is extremely important. With my clients, if you go and look at my website, I have a blog post called Nourishing Flourishing Minds. To be a successful person, whether you do it consciously or whether you do it subconsciously, and we've touched upon that to some degree, you need to understand how the mind works. And being in control of your mind, in other words, being a little more conscious than subconscious, is the ingredient to success.
Brilliant. So I think on that note, you should tell us a little bit about what you do and promote yourself a little bit, Penny. You've given us such great information.
Well, I am a professional coach. I work with mainly women because I want to see people in workplaces, more than anything, enjoy what they do. And if they can enjoy what they do, businesses will flourish a lot more. So I work with predominantly women to build confidence. And, to some degree, it's an easy job because it's very joyful to see women really, really thrive. Because when they do, and you're getting successful women in a boardroom, you're getting successful women in leadership positions, in entrepreneurial positions, we know we're beginning to redress the balance that is so sadly lacking in industrial leadership today. And as I said, yes, it's women, because that's where, if you like, the vanguard is. That's where we need to be working. But equally, we mustn't discourage men to bring out, as you rightly pointed out, Ailey, the feminine within them. But at the moment, I don't turn men away. I genuinely don't. But I find myself working more with professional women to help them realize that they have immense capability that at the moment isn't coming out. But my line of attack with them is to basically say, and I'll put this in scientific terms, if you're Newtonian, cause and effect, you're waiting for the opportunity to arrive. And it most likely won't ever arrive because you'll wait. What I try and do with my clients is encourage them to create the vision and drive for it themselves. It's a completely, and that's the quantum approach to life. And that's all about visioning and then driving towards your vision. And I've got published numbers on my website. The effect it has on the performance of women, both professionally, personally in their work-life balance, and financially, is incredible. So that's what I do. And when I get a moment, I will go more into industry and help industry embrace women within the workplace a lot more. And as I said, at the end of the day, help people work from their heart with a creative mind and a regenerative attitude to work, rather than going to work drenched in fear every day, because that's what we see for a great part of our day in industries right the way across the globe.
Yeah. So everyone, you've heard it here first. You need a bit of confidence boost. You got to come and see Penny. She's got some absolute amazing information available. She's given us probably the best first podcast we could ever wish for. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Penny, and thank you for being my first guest on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
And I really want to wish you much success with this, and I shall watch it with a keen eye.
Okay, thanks everyone.